Hi, everyone. Today's three stories from fellow listeners are out there. I'm not sure what I believe, but listen to the end and let me know your thoughts, what you think is going on. The creatures and situations in these stories are unlike anything I've heard before. Before we get into the stories, I'm excited to announce the release of dreadsarmy.com, where I release strange and weird news every single day. I also post all of my stories there too. And if you want to be a part of the conversation, join the Facebook group. Links below. Now let's get into the stories. Hey Lilith. I've lived in a small house in the middle of the woods for a long time now. There are all sorts of wildlife that I get to see every day that I never used to see when I was a child. It's so stimulating, and it reminds me of how vast and infinite the universe is daily. I do believe, however, that I would have seen a lot more wildlife and might also be dead if I didn't have a paranormal protector who looks after me. I know that sounds crazy, but check this out. One night shortly after I moved in, a wolf was on the porch, sniffing around and checking things out. I was freaked out and I peered out from the window, waiting for it to leave. It saw me, froze, and started growling at me. I didn't know what to do, and then all of a sudden it was jumping up and snapping at the window, snarling viciously. It kept jumping up and trying to bite me through the closed window. A couple more times and the thing would have shattered the glass. And then all of a sudden, I heard the wolf whimper like it had been hurt, and it ran off. I opened the front door, looked around carefully, but it was nowhere to be found. So I went back inside, and perched upside down by the window was a bat. It was obvious that I was going to have a lot of encounters with surrounding wildlife living here. After that, the bat would perch by my window and look in at me every night around 8 o'clock or so. It got to the point that I would look forward to its visit, and I would even start to prepare food and water for it. I built a bat box that he could sleep in, and pretty soon that became his permanent home. All night he would flutter around, eating insects, and then return to the window to look at me. I swear this bat is in love with me. When I look into its eyes, I can see it relax and settle there by the window. It's very protective of me. And anytime anything gets close to the window, it flies around threateningly and scares things off. It's even done it with some friends and family that I've had over. My mom tells me to get rid of it, but I honestly love having it here. I don't know for sure if the wolf would have broken through the window and killed me, but it's possible that this bat saved my life. I feel like he's my guardian angel perched by the window, letting me know that I'm safe every night. And then a couple of months later, after the wolf, a family of bears was roaming around the property, and a big one came up on the front porch and started sniffing around. I slammed on the door and I yelled loudly to scare it off, and it ran off towards the other bears. And then all three of them just stopped and stared at the house. I kept yelling and pounding on the door, trying to get them to run away, but they just kept staring. And then all of a sudden, they just charged at the house and started roaring. And one jumped up and pounded on the door, another one bashed the window, and another one ran around the side. I immediately ran into the bedroom, locked the door, and called 911. I alerted the operator what was going on, and he said that help was on its way. I heard the bears roaring and breaking things, and then all of a sudden, I heard them whimpering. There was silence shortly after that. I waited a couple of minutes and then opened the bedroom door, and the house was a wreck. And one bear was laying in the middle of the living room in a pool of blood. I slowly walked over to it and noticed this huge gash on its neck. The bear was dead and bleeding all over the place. I opened the front door and looked around for the other two bears, but they were gone, nowhere to be found. The police came shortly after that and found the other bears dead in the woods nearby, both with neck wounds. The officer said it was a bite and that it was most likely the same animal that had killed all of them. The officers then told me that I was extremely lucky and that I should get a shotgun to defend myself in the future. Shortly after they left, the bat perched by the window and turned its head towards me. It seemed impossible, but I couldn't help but feel that the bat had saved my life again. If it wasn't my supernatural protector, then what else could have taken on those three bears? I feed the bat insects, fruit and the occasional baby mouse, and every night it looks in on me. I know its secret, though. I don't think it's just a bat. It's a protective vampire, and nothing anyone says can convince me otherwise. I hope one day he will reveal his true form to me and trust that I will keep the secret. But until then, I'll keep taking care of the bat that loves and protects me. Does anybody know of a way to get a vampire to reveal itself? Like, is there a specific food that they like more than anything else? I know garlic kills them, but you never hear about things they enjoy except for blood. And I don't know if I would let him drink my blood, but he has saved my life several times, so I feel that I owe him something. I also think that it would be amazing to be a vampire. I'd become immortal, have superhuman strength, and be able to turn into a bat anytime I wanted. I would miss the daylight and my friends and family, though. Maybe I could visit them as my vampire visits me. Anyway, love your channel, Lilith. Keep up the great work. Hey, Lilith. I've really enjoyed listening to all the stories you post. I usually listen to them in the evenings when I have a fire going. I honestly never dreamed I would have a story to contribute, though. A few years ago, I jumped on the van life trend. I was between jobs and had saved up enough money to be a free spirit for a while. I'd always been adventurous and pictured myself traveling around the United States, and I finally was able to buy a used pop-top van, and then it felt like the whole world opened up to me. It took a while to get some repairs done and get everything I needed for an extended trip, but when I was ready, I started up in Washington State and kept going down the coast of Oregon and California. My dream was to follow the sun so I would never have to really deal with winter temperatures. So when November came around, I landed in Arizona. The sun felt good. It was around 75 degrees. I was used to the freezing temperatures of the north with snow at that time of year. And I had never spent any time in Arizona, so I was really unfamiliar with the area. I was fascinated with the saguaro cactus, and I ended up going through Saguaro National Park. Those things were like 30 to 40 feet tall. I realized that they were covered with these little spines, and some of them had an incredible number of arms. They really seemed otherworldly. And then somebody mentioned Coronado National Forest, and I thought I would camp there for a while. National forests are typically free to camp in, and I was trying to save money. So I was planning to be there for several days. I arrived on a weekend and found myself a spot that looked good. There were a few other campers close by, which made me feel pretty comfortable, and it was fun for me to putter around my campsite and get situated. Then when I was ready to look around the area, I found a good trail and I set out. I really loved the terrain there. I had grown up in a completely different area, so this was all new. I grew up in Colorado and was used to the mountain life. This desert area was really enthralling to experience. It was a strange, new land. After hiking for a couple of hours, I started to head back towards my campsite. Not long after I started walking back down the trail, something caught my eye in the middle of some of the trees. I could see this strange reptilian creature moving back and forth through the brush. I was so startled to see it, I just stared for a while, and then it turned its head and looked right at me with these yellow, piercing eyes. I immediately started to walk at a fast pace back towards my van. This creature was moving along as well, keeping its distance from me, but tracking me. Then this kept up for what seemed to be 10 minutes or so until I reached the clearing where I was parked. I got back to the campsite very shaken and nervous. All my years growing up in the mountains, I had never seen anything comparable to it. From what I could gather, it was very large, and it had stood up on its hind legs at one point. It seemed to be around 6 feet tall when it was upright, and it had large black claws, and it had a head like a lizard. The horrifying thing was that when it looked at me, it felt malicious. Obviously, I was a complete novice to the area. I had no idea what lived there, but that did not seem right at all. I mean, surely I would have heard of a 6-foot-tall lizard before. There would have had to have been some kind of information posted on that kind of thing, right? So the rest of the evening was very quiet and peaceful until about 2 o'clock in the morning when I heard what sounded like this strange mix of hissing and clicking. I had my windows open in the van and it was loud enough to wake me up. I noticed a few other campers were looking outside. A couple of them came out and they were milling around and whispering to each other. I came outside and walked over to them. Someone said it was just some kind of an insect or something, maybe a swarm of insects, but that sound was not like anything else I had ever heard. We listened for a while, but then the sound seemed to move away. I decided I would mention what I had seen earlier, and they looked at me like I was a little bit nuts. So it wasn't just me. The thing I had seen wasn't anything anyone was familiar with. We actually all went back to our RVs. I tried to sleep, but I felt very uneasy. And then the next morning I woke up about 8. When I stepped out of the van, this woman came up to me and asked if I had heard the weird noises. I said that I did, but had no idea what it was. The woman who said she was camping nearby said she had heard of a few sightings of a lizard man recently. I had never heard of such a thing, and if anyone had mentioned it before, I wouldn't have believed it at all. But after that, I just wanted to leave as soon as possible. And now I'm not sure what to think. I decided that if I would go ahead and head further east and try my luck in New Mexico, who knows what I would find. I tried to find information on a lizard man, but there isn't too much to go on. I thought you might want to get the word out and see if any of your listeners have any ideas on what this could have been. Thank you, Lilith. Hi, Miss Lilith. I don't tell many people this story, but something freaking wild happened to me and my friends when we were camping out one night. My buddies and I would throw these raging house parties back in the day. I was a DJ and I had this amazing sound set up that used to tear the house down. I'm talking huge high-end PA system that would get loud enough for a stadium. I had all kinds of crazy lights, fog machines, and visual effects that would turn any dingy apartment into an instant rave. My buddy Jeff was in charge of the booze, and he could whip out professional quality drinks at an amazing rate. My man Kyle had this omelet station that would whip out the most delicious breakfast foods all night long. And Casey was our other roommate, and she was always the life of the party. The morning after one of the craziest parties we've ever thrown, the 4 of us were in awful shape. We all desperately needed to recuperate, but many of the partygoers were planning on showing up again that night. So we figured that we would just head out and go camping deep in the woods and hide out for a while. We gathered all of our supplies and headed down the road. We found a nice secluded spot in the middle of the woods and set up a sweet campsite. We ended up having such a good time that we actually decided to stay the whole weekend. The last night we were there, we were grilling some hot dogs around the fire, relaxing and just having the best time. Suddenly, we heard this whooping noise coming from the forest. We thought we had been completely alone all weekend, so this freaked us all out. Kyle got up and grabbed a flashlight. "Come on, let's find what's ever out there," he said, as he headed towards the sounds. "Let's just get out of here," Casey said, taking off after Kyle. Jeff and I looked at each other and headed off after them. We slowly crept through the woods towards the whooping sounds. As the sounds got louder, we turned off our flashlights and snuck closer. We saw the fire from a campsite peeking through the trees, and we slowly made our way towards the light. What we saw horrified us. There were these naked, human-like things with unnaturally white skin, large black eyes, and skinny long limbs. They were jumping around the fire, whooping and shouting. There must have been 20 of them. One of us, unfortunately, stepped back on a branch and cracked it. Then they all went silent and looked right at us. All 4 of us took off back towards our campsite screaming, panicking. Whatever those things were started whooping and shouting at us as they chased us back to the campsite. "Run! Come on! Go!" We were screaming at each other. We left everything we had brought and sprinted towards our van. We all climbed in and shouted at Casey to start the van up. She patted her pockets and froze. She had left the keys at the campsite. We locked the doors. We looked in the direction that the creatures were coming from. The whooping and the shouting got louder and louder, but then it was silent. We watched for a while, and we didn't see any of the creatures again. We had to go back and get the keys, though. There was no way around it. It was too dangerous and too far to try to leave the forest on foot. That was a truly terrifying walk back. The forest was dead quiet. We did eventually get back to the campsite. We looked around. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary there. We searched for the keys for a while, and finally Casey found them in her sleeping bag. We pretty much left everything we brought and ran back towards the van. Then we all piled in the van, and Casey started it up. The headlights came on, and we saw the creatures had us surrounded. All of them stood equal lengths apart from each other and stared right at us. They all looked dead, emotionless. We thought we might be about to die. After a couple of tense minutes, Casey rolled down the window and shouted, "We're leaving now! We're never coming back! We will never speak of this! Just let us go!" None of them moved at all, and we just sat there. Suddenly, Casey slammed the van into gear and floored it straight towards the road ahead. We were about to hit one of the creatures ahead, and we were all screaming our heads off. As the van went forwards, the creature just bent backwards, and the van didn't even touch it. It was like it went right through it. We sped off, and I looked back at the creatures just blankly staring at us. They watched us make a beeline down the road. As we approached the exit, we looked back. We didn't see them, but then one of us, I don't remember who, looked up, and there they were, looking down at us from the top of the trees. I thought for sure they were following us. They were going to jump down and kill us, but we made our way safely home, safely down the highway, and we never saw them again. My life has calmed down quite a lot since those days, thankfully. My children have asked me several times to take them camping, but I haven't been in the woods since that experience. I honestly don't think I'll ever go camping again. I feel like I have post-traumatic stress from the incident. My college friends and I have fallen out of touch with each other, but writing this down has inspired me to try to reach back out to them. I want to see how their lives turned out and what they think of that night all these years later. I don't know what those creatures were, but I know they weren't human, and I know I never want to see them again. Never. In hindsight, as soon as we heard those whooping noises, we should have gotten out of there immediately. But at least I have this crazy story to tell, and we all made it out alive. I wonder how many people have encountered these creatures and didn't live to talk about them. Thanks for reading this, and thank you for all your great videos. Let me know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Donovan Dread, who releases almost every single day. Also, if you like true crime, then check out Donovan Dread True Crime. There are new releases several times a week.